I'm the development manager here at the Institute, and along with my colleagues, we have developed this TY program that I'm going to talk to you about this evening. We at the Insurance Institute of Ireland, we're a professional educational body. So our remit is to educate people who work in the insurance sector. The central bank requires certain people in certain roles to have a minimum competency qualification. So we design, develop, deliver, and assess those programs. So as I said, that's our target audience. So you might wonder why we've wandered outside of that remit. I suppose there's two main reasons. One is we can only educate people who are in the industry. So we said we would develop this resource to increase awareness of the insurance industry as a potential career for young people. And also, like all other industries, the insurance industry is talent sourcing and recruiting all the time. So I suppose to get people into the industry and for us then to educate them, we said we'd step outside the remit, go a step, I suppose, back in the chain and put insurance on young people's radars. TY is that year where I suppose they have the time and the headspace to look outside of curriculum and outside of syllabus, and obviously there's also the work placement element of TY. And by putting insurance on their radar, we're hoping that we'll open up to alternative career options, but also maybe to alternative work placements. So this program was developed for that purpose, and in developing it, we were very conscious of the cohort that it's aimed at. So as I said, in our day jobs, we primarily focus on people who are working in the industry who obviously have a completely different age profile. So this was a really interesting project to work on, to develop content and examples and so on that were relevant to this cohort. We developed it in line with the National Council for Curriculum and Assessment's template and guidelines. And again, that caters to, I suppose, the objectives of TY, that idea of independent learners, career exploration, and more, I suppose, of a focus on the transversal skills or the personal skills. We also had an eye on the financial literacy strategy, the National Financial Literacy Strategy, again, which gives guidelines for anyone who's developing content in the area of financial literacy aimed at that cohort. So that's I suppose, the why and the how, and so this is the actual resource itself. So what you're looking at on screen, I'll just walk you through it. And again, as you can see from the title of it, this is the demo model, and it's very similar. It's practically identical to what the student will see when they actually go into the learning platform and access the program. The only real difference is that on this screen, their table of contents will appear down the left-hand side. So it's the exact same experience as you'll have now, but the layout will be ever so slightly different. So if we just really quickly flick down through this, we introduce students to the module. Again, I'll open this page in a second and you'll be able to see it. But there's basically three modules in the program. There's a module on money, in which we cover financial literacy and sustainability. There's a module on insurance, and then there's a module on careers in insurance. And the idea is that the student would work their way through it independently. So the program was designed initially for individual students, and it's still used that way. So it's, as I said, it's designed in a way that focuses on this cohort. So in terms of navigation and accessibility and instructions, it's presumed that it's a 16 and 17-year-old that is using it on their own. Having said that, the program can be built into any sort of a classroom environment. It can be built into a taster subject. It can be built into a junior cert or leaving cert program. It can be built into a career guidance teacher's class where they maybe want to talk about an insurance career. There's parts of the program, as we'll see when we go on, that's the junior cycle business module, covers insurance principles and insurance products. So a junior cycle teacher could use that if they wanted. So basically, while it was designed for a student to work through from beginning to end by themselves, basically the content can be used in any shape or form that suits the classroom environment or the student or the school or the TY syllabus. Okay, so we start here, and the first page we go into is just the welcome page. And you can see now the layout of the page has changed, and now the table of contents is down the left-hand side. And if you look here over on the top, on the left-hand side at the top kind of entry, you can see that this grey circle is being shaded in. So basically, as we progress through the program, the circles will be shaded in. So the student can see their progress, they can see how many pages or chapters or sections there are, and how they're progressing down through them. So this first page is, as I said, the introductory page, and it basically introduced the Insurance Institute. But this, I suppose, is the best visual of the program, similar to the table of contents we just looked at. So as I said, there's a money module where we look at financial literacy and sustainability. And again, we look at that, I suppose, particularly through the lens of insurance. So like when we talk about sustainability, we talk about the insurance industry's role in, I suppose, behaving more sustainably. We look at insurance, the role of insurance, and we look at then the careers, the any chance of a job, where we look at the career options, the skills, and the educational pathways that students can take into the insurance industry. We have some bonus content here for the student who always wants to do a little bit more. And this content also is the content I referred to when I said about it overlapping with the junior cycle business content, or as a taster for the senior cycle business subjects, business module as well. So again, like we're quite happy for a student to for a teacher to register on this program and to use the content as suits their class format. Each of the modules you'll see as we go on has kind of the same layout. So we look at content, so I suppose the core content, there's videos, there's interactions, there's quizzes. At the end of each section, there's key points and a quiz. So if you look down here on the left-hand side, you'll see there's the content there. What is financial literacy? Are we financially literate? The language of money. How do I plan financially? Then we key points, the knowledge check, and all done, and they move on to the next module. Okay, so if we just look at one of those pages. So again, I'm not going to walk through the whole of the content, but I'm just going to look at a few pages to give you a sense of what the layout is and how the students can interact with it. So again, bearing in mind this cohort, we kind of really bore them in mind when we're looking at the language, at the interactions, at the graphics. And so on each page, obviously there's pictures, there's videos, there's quizzes, as we'll see when we go on. And we also flag to the student how long it will take them to cover this content. Now, obviously it's not going to take every student the exact same length of time, but we give them an estimate to manage expectations. And the same can be done for a teacher in the classroom. If you think, will I get this done in a class? Or how many of these sections or pages will I get done? These estimates at the top of the page will help you work your way through that. And again, bearing in mind that this cohort are of the age that they're at, we define a lot of terminology along the way, because I suppose there's language that we use in our daily lives or in talking about particular subjects that these students wouldn't be familiar with. So again, here we have like a key card or a definition card, and the student can flip it over to see what the definition is. So again, if you're in a classroom environment, you could say, okay, what do we think it'll be on the back of the card? Has anyone any ideas? And again, the instructions are very clear throughout this whole program. So we tell them to click on the arrow at the top right to see the definition, and click at the arrow at the bottom to look at the next question or the next definition. So it's what is financial literacy? They click it here and it gives them the definition of it. Again, very much in the language that this cohort would understand. So it's not like central bank terminology. It's not insurance advisor or financial advisor terminology. It's in a way that it's in a language that they'd understand. Then you can scroll through to the next question and flip over to get the next definition, and so on. So there's three, we can see at the bottom, 3 of 3, there's 3 questions and definitions there, and we can flick them over. And again, we talk about, what does it mean to be financially literate? We introduce them kind of subtly then to various elements of the financial services sector. So we have the governor of the central bank, again, relevant quotes, at a level and a kind of a depth of information that's I suppose useful for them or palatable for them. And again, in all the examples, so if we're talking about financial literacy or financial independence, we're not talking to this cohort about mortgages or car insurance. We're talking to them about, savings so that you have enough money to go on holidays. Or we're talking about, not having to borrow money or recognizing a scam. So again, examples that are relevant to them are relatable for them. At the end of each page, then you just click to continue on to the next section. So if we click here, you can see over here on the left-hand side, the what is financial literacy is now ticked, so they know they've completed that. Another difference between the demo model and what the students will see is that we actually have gatekeepers within each of these pages. So on a lot of the pages, there's something the student has to do before they can move to the next page. And it's not a big task. It might be that they watch a video, it might be that they flip over the definitions, it might be that they answer a question, just something, obviously, I suppose, so that we can be sure that they're not just flicking through the content without actually engaging in it in some shape or form. So then we literally click on the next page, and again, you can see the similar format is used, kind of an introduction, an interaction, a video of some sort, some stats for them to understand the amount of, or the elements, the percentages relating to different elements of financial literacy. Again, subtly introducing financial services related bodies like MABs and so on. And there's lots of points in the program where we have additional information, again, where the student can, click on a link and be brought out to a report or to another video, kind of extra to what's on the surface of the program. Okay. And so we, again, graphics, lots of visuals, lots of interactions for them. So as I said, I'm not going to go through every single page of the module, but you can see, as I said, that it covers the content. And then at the end of each module, we have a key points, which is just literally the key facts from that module, again, summarized on one page. And then they move on to a knowledge check. At the end of each module, there's a knowledge check. And again, these are quite simple. They're multiple choice questions, and all of the answers are in the course. So, we're not asking them to extrapolate anything from what they've learned. If it's a definition, it's the exact definition that's back a few pages. So they answer those those questions. And this one, for example, is like to join the two parts together. So you kind of fit the jigsaw pieces together, and then you submit it, and it tells you whether you're right or wrong, and you can take it again. Okay. So that's the financial literacy module. Again, with the sustainability module, same format. We kind of introduce the topics, and we look at, I suppose, particularly how it relates to them. So what type of consumer are you in terms of your sustainability? And there's a really interesting interaction here where the student goes on to this, I suppose, what would you call it, calculator, and where they answer questions about their lifestyle. Do they use recyclable, do they recycle? Do they use a water bottle instead of buying a new bottle of water every time they need one? Do they cycle to work or school, excuse me? Do they walk to school? Litter, all that sort of stuff. And they work their way through it, and the calculator gives them their ecological footprint. So how many planets it takes to sustain their lifestyle. So again, it brings it from kind of the theoretical to the relevant. And we talk about, being an ethical consumer, shopping sustainably. And again, quiz questions thrown in throughout it. And as I said, at the end of it, then we have the key points and the quiz. And again, as I said, relating it to the insurance industry. So it particularly looks at how the insurance industry is contributing to a more sustainable environment. And then we move on to the insurance, which is the second module. And again, I'll just dip into this to show you how it is, or what it's like. So again, like at the start of all the modules, we look very much at the kind of the relevance and the terminology. Sorry, I'll just switch off the sound on this. So in this there, it's what we call micro learning or e-learning. And there's a whole suite in here which looks at risk, peril, hazard, physical hazards, moral hazards, and they work their way through that. So again, you can't hear it now, but there's audio and video and everything that goes with this, and they interact with that. There's a few of them there. Sorry, the sound is going to come on all of them. So there's a few of them there, and then I suppose it looks at the insurance as a function, and the insurance market over here on the left-hand side. You can see the different topics. And again, as I said, at the end of this, there's a knowledge check. The interesting, I suppose, extra in the insurance module is that after the knowledge check, it brings you to a number of case studies. And again, looking at this cohort, they're again not kind of at the stage in their life when they're looking at house insurance or car insurance or any sort of insurance really. So what we do is we use case studies for content which we hope is relevant to them. So in other words, pop stars, movies being made, theme parks, oil producers. And I suppose just to show two things. One, to show insurance in action, but also I suppose to show it in kind of a non-traditional or non-standard way. So for example, in this we look at, a pop star, and it gives a video on kind of the facts and figures about her. She's a global star. She entered the American Pop Star her earnings. And then it talks about, I suppose, the risks that she's exposed to. Again, it reminds us of the definitions that they would have learned in the insurance module. But so she throws a glass of water at a chat show host, or she loses her voice, or her niece is kidnapped because she's such a high profile celebrity. So again, to look at insurance in, I suppose, a more unique or interesting context. And then the last module we come to is the careers in insurance. And we just look at, I suppose, the unusual or unique kind of careers in insurance, or the ones, I suppose, specific to insurance. The idea of a broker, underwriter, surveyor, loss adjuster, loss assessor, actuaries. And we just, each of these has a drop down where it describes the role. Again, very briefly, just, this isn't, examinable content. Again, it's about awareness, it's about putting it on their radar. So while we do the knowledge checks throughout it, it's not an exam scenario. It's more so to keep them engaged. And so then we move on to what skills do they need? And I suppose a big part of this, if it was being delivered in a classroom situation, was to really emphasize to the students that they are actually on their way to developing these skills, so especially during TY, are they good with people, whether it's working in a supermarket or getting involved in kind of projects outside of school, Green Flag or Goshka or whatever the other kind of extracurricular activities that they have access to during TY, or time management, dealing with people, problem solver, preference for numbers, all of those. So we're trying to relate, I suppose, their newly developing skills to the skills that are used in these roles. So that idea of, if you can see it, you can be it, that they will, I suppose, relate to these skills and see that they're starting to develop them, that they're not something over there that adults have. And then we talk about the career insurance. And just recently, the Irish Financial Skill Services Skills Framework was developed, and it basically shows the kind of progression through a career. And we have a career pathway in insurance, which it fits into this skills framework. And basically, we look at the, I suppose, insurance specific roles, and we explain to the students what is it these people do, or what these roles do, why they do it, and how they do it. And again, it's, I suppose, fitting into or building into what skills do you need, what kind of job is it, is it a numbers job, is it a people's job, and what educational pathway would you need to get there. So again, we have these profiles or these skills path or career pathways for claims professionals, underwriting professionals, and brokers. And then we look at education. So if you want, if you can see yourself in one of those careers, what's the pathway to it? And again, I suppose the two main areas which the two main pathways are independent study. So this is where someone works for an insurance company. I mentioned earlier that the central bank require employees to meet a minimum level of competency. And so while they're working, they're achieving those levels of competency, and they do that through ourselves. So we have an educational pathway that they go from, I suppose, day one in their career throughout their career. Another alternative is we have an apprenticeship, an insurance practitioner apprenticeship. And this is a really great option for students who maybe college isn't the right choice for them. It doesn't suit their, I suppose, study preferences or their learning preferences. Students are more hands-on. This apprenticeship, they work 4 days in an insurance company or in a broker or in a claims or loss adjusters. And then they study for the apprenticeship, which will earn them a level 8 honours degree. So it's a 3-year program. So again, I suppose it's joining all those dots. It's telling them the skills that they need, the education pathway that they could follow, and the possible roles that they could fulfill at the end of that. And so we have video clips from apprentices who have completed or who are completing the program. And again, at the end of this section, we have key points, which just kind of pulls together the various careers and the various skills and routes that the students might take through it. So that's a whistle-stop tour of the program. Again, I'll just bring the screen back to the modules that they cover. I suppose an important question that we have gotten about this is what is the estimated time frame that you would expect for it to take a student to work through it? And we reckon a student sitting down by themselves, there's about 10 hours of content or 10 hours of learning in it. Now, obviously, if you embed it in a classroom situation, it can be longer than that. And as I said, the content can be used any which way. You could have a discussion about what is financial literacy, have the students work their way through it, and then set them, a paper or, a quiz or whatever you want at the end of it, however you want to build it out into your timetable slot or into the curriculum or syllabus that you have for them for TY. Another question is the cost, and this program is completely free. And there's no cost at all attached for students or for schools. So how do you register for this program? So we're looking at the Insurance Institute. We have the simplest web address ever. So up here in the top left, you'll see that it's www.iii.ie. So if you go to our webpage and under programs, we have specialty programs and the transition year program is there. And on this page, it's a very light page in terms of content. It's really concise, so it's not overwhelming at all. And it just says like what the program is about, what's in it for the student, why should the school get involved. Here you'll see is the page where you could register for this evening's session. And on this page, we will have early next week, we'll have a recording of this session in case any of your colleagues or even yourself want to come back and look at it. And down here we have the program registration. So there's a registration option for teachers or students. And the form is really simple. So students literally click here and they're asked for their name, first name, second name, their email address, confirmation of that, and their school name. And so they literally fill out that form and then a user account. We set up a user account and we email them a link to our learning platform. And they go in there and they customize their password. They access the program, they complete the program. They're issued with, or there's a download, then a digital badge they can download for themselves. And I suppose an important thing to note is that at the end of the academic year, we wipe down those records for data protection and child protection reasons. And so we don't keep a record of it, of the student or their completion or of their digital badge. So just if you are putting students on the program, when they complete it and get their digital badge, make sure they download it or print it or whatever they want to do with it, because there will be no record kept of it in-house for those reasons. I think that's it. I think I've covered off not only the program, but the kind of the most common questions that we had at the earlier session. But Amanda, if anyone had a question.